Well, welcome everyone. I'm Brenda McKinley, Library Director here at the Ridgefield Library. And I have a very simple job. The person who's going to do the big introduction is our amazing president of really the best League of Women Voters in the country, right? Ridgefield's own.
Thank you, Brenda, and I really want to thank the library for, again, hosting this event and co-sponsoring it with us. The library's been an extraordinary partner to us, and we really appreciate everything they do for the League and for the community. So as Brenda said, I'm Marilyn Carroll, the very proud president of the League of Women Voters of Ridgefield, and this is our 14th Get to Know You Town meeting. We started these meetings 5 years ago to educate and inform Ridgefielders about our town government and other community organizations, and the residents really seem to like it. And as you know, today is Valentine's Day. But did you know that it is also the League's 103rd anniversary? The League was officially founded in Chicago in 1920, just 6 months before the 19th Amendment was passed, allowing women to vote. The League really began as what we called a mighty political experiment designed to help 20 million women carry out their new responsibilities as voters. For over 100 years, we have been a nonpartisan, grassroots organization that believes voters should play a critical role in democracy. Our vision in Ridgefield is to be a vibrant, visible, and respected advocate for citizens of this community by providing opportunities for education, civic engagement, and civil debate. And we hope you'll join us because we are always looking for fellow visionaries. Now, before I introduce Mr. Marconi, I'd just like to mention a few upcoming League events. Our next event, which I think you're all going to be really interested in, is being hosted and co-sponsored by the library again, and will be our annual Meet Your Legislators meeting on February 25th at the library from 10 to 11:30 a.m. with our state legislators, Amy Berger-Giavallo, Keith Denny, Julie Kushner, and Cece Mayer. These members of the Connecticut State Legislature will discuss what is happening at the state capitol and let us know where they stand on important issues. And a question and answer session will follow. And on Sunday, March 5th at 2 p.m., again at the library, we will celebrate Women's History Month with the library co-sponsoring A Journey, a musical one-woman show with award-winning creator and actor Kimberly Lewis. And finally, we are very excited to announce that the artist for the League's annual art fundraiser will be our own Ridgefield Guild of Artists member and award-winning artist Clarice Sherrill, who has created a spectacular work of art, especially for the League. And raffle tickets will be on sale soon, and the drawing will be on May 9th. And the picture of there's a picture of the picture back on the table over there if you want to see what it looks like. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce First Selectman Rudy Marconi, who will give us a State of the Town presentation and answer questions afterwards. We want to thank Rudy for participating in this series. He's been doing this a very long time for the League, giving a State of the Town presentation, and we really appreciate it. We've been at various events and venues. You're doing this, so thank you so much for doing it. I know the town residents really appreciate it, as does the League. That's it.
Thank you, Marilyn. Marilyn and I do go back quite a few years, the early 2000s, when Marilyn, my number was actually on her speed dial. And that had a lot to do with the expansion of our schools and addressing the overcrowding in our schools some 20 plus years ago. So thank you, Marilyn and the League, for having this event. I want to thank everyone for being here and recognize Maureen Kozlark on the Board of Selectmen. Maureen, thank you for being here today. I don't believe we have any other elected officials here, but you know, it's been an interesting couple of years, right? We're finally out of the pandemic. A lot of us still wear masks. I understand that and appreciate that, and you should be wearing them if there's any kind of concern at all for your own health. But we've come a long way, and our numbers are tough right now. I'm just going to spend a tiny bit of time on this. Due to the home testing, a lot of the data that we receive from the state of Connecticut is not as reliable as it used to be, for obvious reasons. Everyone's testing at home. They don't submit those results to the state, so the state is minus all of that information. But it is a good general guideline, and we're down around 12, 10 to 800,000. Not bad, not great, although we are making vast improvements, but still a very serious concern, and anyone who has any kind of a compromised health situation, wear those masks, please. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone, February 14th, and thank you to the library for hosting this and many, many events in town that the library has become such a vital and important part of our community. The crown and the jewel in the crown of Main Street, I always say, and it truly is. And it's represented by the number of people that come through these doors each and every year. My name is Rudy Marconi, and I do serve as your first selectman. I thought today, as in the past, I'll try to give you an overview of our community. Start off with a brief financial overview covering the year ending 2022, which was last June. Our current year, which is fiscal year 23, ends next June 30th. And then what we're budgeting for in 24. And yes, we are already in the middle of budgets, and you can understand how difficult that could be, that we could be looking at projecting what our costs are going to be over a year from now. And given what we've been through, it's a mighty challenge, but we're doing the best we can. First, the numbers for 22. 22 was an excellent year for the town of Ridgefield. We completed the year with an unassigned fund balance of $15.9 million, which was about an $800,000 increase over 21. Unfortunately, pensions did drop because our pension reports is a snapshot in time. And for the June 21 fiscal year, there was a snapshot taken of where our investments were right at that point in time. And it reflected a 27% increase. So every one of our pension funds were up around 110, over 100%, 105 to 110. This past year has been a very interesting year if you all looked at your own investments. The town experienced the same thing, and we finished that snapshot in time in June of 22 with a 13.9% decrease. So you can understand that the air was let out of the balloon. No reference to the balloons floating around. But it was a drastic change. And although it's come back a little bit, it's not back to where it was. So our pensions, if you look at our annual financial report, audited statements, it shows a funded position of around 90 plus or minus percent. One's at 89, one's at 91, 92, all for pensions in that area. That's not great, but they will come back because historically we've always been at that 98 to 100% funding. As a result, for next year's budget, we have to add $600,000 into the account to try and get ourselves even. We did finish with a surplus though, and that's because our tax collections were incredible, over 99%. We forecast about 98.7 collection. Golf revenues, since the pandemic, everyone wanted to be outside, right? Our golf revenues, we had some record days in terms of revenue there, so those are adding. Conveyance, the real estate through 2021 was off the charts in terms of demands for housing here, and as a result, our conveyance revenues were up substantially. But that leveled off a little bit in 22, still an excellent year. This year, in February, we experienced a severe drop in activity. For the first 7 days, we only had 2 sales totaling $1.2 million. That is an incredible reversal of what the market was doing. And the BOE in 22 returned $800,000 back to the town. It's the highest year in a long time that we've seen those kinds of returns from the BOE. So that gave us a substantial surplus. We ended up finishing the year with about a $1.2, $1.3 million surplus. And on top of that, we didn't use any of the fund balance that the Board of Finance had allocated. So Total, at the end of '22, we ended up with about a $2.8 million surplus that we gave back to the Board of Finance, back to the fund balance. And I'll get into some of the issues on fund balance that are around in a little bit. Next, I would like to get into the current year and talk about what we're experiencing right now. Are there any questions, though, about 22 and what we saw, what we did? It's kind of a brief overview, but in essence, we had an excellent year to close out our fiscal year 22. In 23, we're now 7 months into that year, and as I said earlier, what a difference a year makes. Once again, the Board of Finance did allocate an additional $1.5 million out of the fund balance to help hold down the increase in the mill rate, so we have very low increases. I think over the last 5 years, we averaged like a 0.5 increase in the mill rate. We're unfortunately experiencing much higher expenses, though, just like you all are at home, whether it's oil or gasoline, natural gas. They have gone through the roof, so we're experiencing overages in all those accounts. We're experiencing an overage in our legal line, which we really, we had some years where a little bit over, a little bit under, but this year is exceptional that it's going to be way over. And it's driven by one case in particular, and we were sued, the town of Ridgefield, by Save the Sound. All of you know what Save the Sound, that group is, to protect the waters flowing into the Long Island Sound, and we were sued on the basis that we did not submit our paperwork under what is called the MS4 regulations, which is stormwater control. And although we did all the work, Charles Fisher, our town engineer, had retired in 19, and the paperwork didn't get submitted. Well, 20 and 21 were all about COVID. We didn't do much of that at all. And unfortunately, Save the Sound hires interns to monitor the submission of paperwork to the state of Connecticut. And lo and behold, we get sued with about 6 or 7 other communities that were in a similar position. And they had said it's a $100,000 penalty, plus we want $25,000 in legal fees. And we had to argue that. We reduced it to a $70,000 penalty and roughly $17,000 in legal fees, which really weren't fair, I'll tell you that, because all 5 towns that were sued, the same paperwork was submitted in every town. They just changed the name. But every town was forced to pay the legal fees for their individual community of $17,000, $14,000, $18,000. So where are we with that? We've submitted everything. We have Kai and Bond working for us, but our legal line was hit with that $87,000 charge. So when you go through our budgets this year, you're looking at an extensive overage. Kevin Redmond, who's our Director of Finance, said, I don't know where else we can park this penalty. It's not a special appropriation. We're doing it out of our current budget, but it is an $87,000 hit. If you pull that out, we're at about $130,000, $140,000. Still running high, but all of it is impacted by the Save the Sound lawsuit. So that's been settled. The penalty, they asked us to be submitted to Trout Unlimited, and they were involved in removing a dam down in Wilton, allowing trout to swim upstream, which is great. However, we felt the need was for the money, since it's taxpayer dollars, that it had to be spent here in Ridgefield, Connecticut. And it took a while, but they agreed to that finally. And we ended up making an arrangement with the Norwalk River Watershed Association, and we're going to build a detainage system for all the parking up at Yanity, where that grass area is down on front on Prospect. We'll put in a parking lot. It'll be grass covered, but it will have a drainage system, galleys underneath that will accept all the water and hopefully have it just permeate into the soil there, taking it out of the impact on the Great Swamp. So we get points for that on the MS4. but that's the resolution that we've come to. So it's going to benefit the town of Ridgefield. Our utilities, gosh, I mentioned it before. I'm not going to go through each one. I mean, we all know what it's doing. Bottom line, for the town, that equates to about a $500,000 increase for us going into the 24 fiscal year. Substantial. We're going to have to address that somehow. We have locked in for 2 years our electric rate. We locked it in at about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. That's for the generation. Distribution still has to come through Eversource. But we're going to see an increase there. We locked that in for 2 years. What'll be great, assuming that the rates continue to go up, I don't know where the ceiling's going to be, but we'll hold it firm at that. So we have an increase this year, but for the next 2 years, we'll be flat, unfortunately. Our emergency fund, Tony Phillips, who runs our social services department, one of the fallouts from all of this is the many, many people that we help in Ridgefield through social services, and a lot of it's the emergency fuel account, where people don't have the money to pay. I know we had our fuel back in November, I think it was, and it was twice the amount that we had paid the previous time, which was shocking. And I said to my wife, Peggy, what are people doing that can only buy 50 gallons, 100 gallons at a time? And that's what social service is. Those are the people, and a lot of them in Ridgefield that we work with. What it's creating on our emergency fund, and we have a healthy, like a couple of $100,000 heading in, and that's all private donations, by the way. It's not taxpayer dollars, it's individuals, generous people in our town that donate to that fund. If we continue the current burn rate, we're going to be out in about 6 months. We will have run that account dry. And that's due to the increases of everything from eggs to milk to diesel fuel to heating fuel, gasoline, across the board. So we're going to be making a special plea for people, if you have $5, $10, or some of the more wealthy people in our community, to perhaps keep it local, invest in your community, invest in the people who live here. They're all great people, and they need our help. So that's one message I would like you to leave here with, understanding, is that social services, the emergency fund, needs your help. Anything that you can do is appreciated. So that's 23, the current year. I'm going to get in later on to a lot more of the community projects, right? I'm just doing some numbers right now to give you an idea of where we're at. But if you have any questions, raise your hand. Raise your hand at any point in time if you have any questions. I do want to talk a little bit about 24. 24, as I said, is going to be an interesting year. We have a lot of increases. Currently, the Board of Education is at a 3.79% increase. It's lower than what, personally, I thought we were going to be looking at. And if you look around Fairfield County, even the state of Connecticut, some of the smaller towns, on many of the organizations I participate in are looking at 8, well up into the double-digit increases. And it's staggering what some of these towns are looking at from the Board of Education. So to say I was pleasantly surprised is an understatement. It is fabulous that the Board of Education, the administration, has been able to put together a 3.79% increase. And I think it's important to realize that one thing that allowed them to do that is the fact that they were able to pre-purchase, or they made an agreement last year for insurance, health insurance, for the 24 fiscal year, so that their health insurance for 24 is a flat line. And that's an incredible cost that they were able to eliminate. So we're thankful for their work and what they did to help hold it to a 3.79 increase. Unfortunately, on the town side, which is unusual, right? Every year we're well below a 3.79, usually in the 2.5%, 2% area. This year, right now, we're at about 6.5%. And major, like I said, $500,000 just for utility increases. Then you have your normal contracts. Our raises are in that 2.5% area, 2.75. So our raises are reasonable. Hopefully inflation is not going to have too big of an impact on that. But we are seeing some large increases in expenses. And one thing you need to realize about the Board of Selectmen's budget and the Board of Education, they don't have any revenue. We are not allowed to count revenue. So, for example, if a program at Parks and Rec is going to cost $30,000 for the year to run, that expense goes into the budget. If they're anticipating $40,000 in revenue for that program, that money goes into the revenue account and is not reflected in the Selectmen's budget. Bottom line, we may see an increase in the Recreation Department's budget, but it's not offset by revenues. At the bottom of the sheet it is, because they take revenues into consideration later on, but when you look at the Board of Selectmen's budget, you will just see a percentage increase. And that's somewhat of an issue for us over the years. We would like to change that, but that's municipal county. Kevin said we can't change it at all unless we get everyone to do the same thing. So we have to live with that for 24. The reval. How many of you got a letter in the mail showing that your properties went up? Everybody, right? I did. In fact, I got home and Peggy said, "You've got to be kidding me. Our house went up that much money. What are our taxes going to do?" And I said, the reassessment, the revaluation of property has nothing to do with taxes, generally speaking. And I'll explain why. Right now, we have a grand list, and that grand list is the value of all the properties in the town of Ridgefield. And you all know the demand over the last couple of years. We do a reval every 5 years. Over the last couple of years, the demand for the houses, as I mentioned, conveyance taxes, has been through the roof, and property values have gone up substantially. But everything went up, right? So our grand list saw an increase of just over 2.03%. So that, when you look at that, you say, well, that's not a big increase. It is when you look at the dollar volume. When your town is worth $5.5 to $6 billion, a 2% increase is a substantial amount of money. So the values all went up. What does that do to your home? You look at how much your value went up. So if it went up 15%, figure that out, the percentage increased. The average home went up 14%. And if you went up 15%, because of that value increase, you're going to pay 1% more. Because your house is worth more. Right? And that's totally separate from the budget. And overall, at the end of the day, a third of the homes go up, a third of the homes go down, and a third remain the same. Because legally, we cannot collect any more taxes after the reval than we were collecting before. So if we collected $100 million today, the reval takes place, we can only collect $100 million tomorrow. It's just changing the makeup of the town, whether it's commercial property, a McMansion, a small home in town. It adjusts all of those prices, those values, based on demand and what we saw over the previous 4 or 5 years. So that's the reval. Then we do the budget that I've been talking to you about. The budget is what really impacts your taxes. How much money are we spending? And where are we spending it? But the total amount we're spending, which, as I said, is the mill rate, right? That's going to dictate how much your taxes go up. Bottom line. Do you have questions on that? People are having a tough time understanding it. my taxes, our value for our home went up $200,000. We were shocked. But our taxes aren't going to go up because of that, unless I figure out how much more than the average we went up. So if the average went up 14% and we went up 20%, I'll see about a 6% increase. Somewhere else in town, values went down 6% because it's got to balance out at the end of the day. Okay?
Why?
Why up?
Why? You're only allowed to collect 100 million, whatever.
Right.
Who said that?
The state of Connecticut, it's a law.
Why?
Because what could happen is we could take that mill rate and tell you, so when your values go up, the mill rate has to come down because you're going to collect the same amount of money, right? And the mill rate is what we need for our budget. We're not allowed to falsify that mill rate by saying, there are some towns that have done this, by saying, it really didn't go up that much, it went up less, and keep some of that money in the budget. We can't do that. We don't want to cheat the taxpayer, and that would be cheating the taxpayer. So sometimes Al Garza will talk about maintaining 2 sets of books. And I said, Al, you shouldn't talk like that. But he's from Yonkers, so he is a character. But he does have to run 2 sets of books. One for the current budget year, what we're doing, and looking at the values, and he will then say, the mill rate's like, what, 28, 34, 43, somewhere around there. That mill rate will come down because all the properties went up. If we didn't drop the mill rate, we would be collecting a ton more money, right? We can't do that. We have to drop the mill rate to collect the same amount of money tomorrow as we were yesterday, by law. Yes?
I'm ask, what is the budget for the BOE in Ridgefield in dollar terms for 2022-2023? And how that compares to, let's say, Westport or Darien, money-wise, so dollar terms, how much money goes from budget to DOE?
Total dollar volume
Exactly.
for the Board of Education?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, we're under, I don't know about Darien, but Elliot Landon is the superintendent of schools. I think he's still there, believe it or not. He used to be here at Ridgefield. And their budget, about 8-9 years ago, they had a first selectman, Gordon Josoloff, who called me, and he said, at our town meeting, people were very angry because Ridgefield's budget is $20 million less than Westport, and yet their kids are going to the same school as our kids. What are we doing wrong? Why is it costing us so much more? So to answer your question, I know specifically Westport's running, it's probably about 15 to 20 million more
More than us.
than us.
Oh, okay.
Correct. But if you look at their administration and their structure, they have a lot more middle school assistant superintendents, etc.
Okay. Why I ask because I have been told or read someplace that schools in Ridgefield rankings has gone down in the last whatever 5 to 10 years, but the budget has been increasing.
Yeah, in enrollment, we peaked out at about 5,600 students just prior to the recession. And since the recession, it dropped and bottomed out at about 4,400. It's come back up to about 45 more recently, but the growth hasn't been great. We are, personally I am, seeing because of the influx of a lot of people, especially young people with families moving out of Brooklyn and high density areas, not wanting to be in the elevator and saying, that's it, let's move out to the country, to Ridgefield. I think that enrollment's going to start climbing again over the next 3 to 5 years. I don't know, one of the good barometers to use is the library and some of the reading programs for the young kids that are coming in here. When you see those numbers going up, that eventually is going to roll into enrollment at our schools. So yes, we are down in enrollment about 1,000 students. What that will do is increase the cost per student, obviously, right? So the cost per student went up. One of the reasons is because of the drop in enrollment. Also, you're correct, a lot of people have felt, why didn't the schools consolidate? Why didn't they drop one of the other schools? That bus has left the station. Unfortunately, 10 years ago, we could have done that probably. It just can't be done now. And keep in mind, the State Board of Education continually passes unfunded mandates that require the Board of Education to teach a certain way, to maintain certain tests, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all money. It is all money. But overall, I think we're getting, as taxpayers here, a good bang for the buck, so to speak. The education, and I've said this forever, is the engine that drives this economy. When people were moving out of Brooklyn and the areas of the city, and we're looking at Connecticut, you go to the Gold Coast of Darien and not Wilton, but Duquesne and Darien, Greenwich. They couldn't afford there, but they could come to Ridgefield, get as good a quality education for their growing family, and find a home that they could afford. So education is critical to this community from an economic perspective. It does attract people here. Yes?
This is an energy question. Is there any way or any interest in the town trying to promote solar energy?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll be getting into that when I get into the community part of our projects. Yeah, we've done quite a bit in solar. So fiscal 24, right now today we're looking at about a 2.5% increase in taxes. If you took a snapshot, that would mean if you pay $10,000 a year, that's $250. If you pay $20,000 a year, it's about a $500 increase. Then you can figure somewhere in the middle. The average taxes paid by a taxpayer, property taxes, is $13,000 per year. And, by the way, one of the benefits to the mill rate coming down, Rob, that we were talking about, is that your car tax will drop as well. And a lot of us saw an increase in our car taxes over the last year or 2 years. That number will come down because the mill rate's coming down as well. All righty? We ready to move on? Okay, explain the assessments. Now I'll turn my attention to community projects, and there are quite a few of them. There's a long list. I asked Jake Muller to, he's our director of facilities, to give me a list. And one of the important things before I get into a list of all these projects is we have charter revision going on now, and the league, I'm sure, is interested in that. They had their second public hearing last night, and there were only 2 people there. The first one was on Saturday, and there was no one there. No one showed up on Saturday morning. The question is, are we getting the word out? And a lot of people are saying the Ridgefield Press is no longer there, you know, you can't pick it up, see everything going on. That's a fact. But we have to figure out, how do we get people notified of something like a charter revision? Now, it may be people just don't care. I mean, we used to have a big crowd here. They're not here today. There's a reason for that. And I think people are being inundated with information constantly, all day long. These phones are just buzzing and ringing, and more information. And there'll be a lot more about the budget via that method. But we did not see people at charter revision. Maybe they're just happy with the charter. Yes?
But Rudy, last night was when the Board of Education made their vote on the proposed budget. So if you were paying attention to that, that was the meeting that you were going to watch last night.
I don't know how many people were there.
No, they watch online. You can stream live.
Oh, they were
on YouTube.
online?
So
Yeah,
there have been people
we
there.
stream all of the meetings. All of the charter revision meetings are being streamed.
But it was a clash.
To let people know. But it's just not a good participation. So Thursday night, I made a few suggestions. Maureen and I were there Thursday night. and had a discussion with them, but maybe there just isn't a lot to be changed. You know, do you change your form of government from a town meeting, which is what we have now, to a representative town meeting that Westport has, and Darien, and Greenwich? Those seem to be, from talking to the elected officials, a little bit more difficult to run, because you have representatives from every neighborhood. You can end up with 200, 300, 400 people, depending on whatever you decide on. One thing it does do, it generates enthusiasm, but they find it very difficult moving something forward with the RTM. So I feel pretty comfortable. The only negative associated with the type of government we have is, can an individual bring something to a town meeting and bring the people that he or she want to vote in favor of it and get something done? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll use this small but perfect example. Years ago, Andy Bodner was on the Board of Selectmen, and we were talking about establishing a lease agreement for the Goodwill trailer, right? You know where that's located. And we incur a little bit of expense every year, plowing snow, cleaning it up, doing all that. But it's no imposition. Other than that, it's not a big cost to us. But I said, every one of our 501s pays something. Why would the Goodwill absolutely pay nothing when we know they're generating a profit from that operation, because people of Ridgefield are very generous, and it's incredible the quality of clothing that may be dropped off there. And we had a town meeting. And we agreed, I don't know, it was $300 or $400 a month, whatever it was going to be. And it was the 5 members of the Board of Selectmen, and I think 5 members of the public showed up. 5 people. And the vote went 6-4. And it failed. And Andy was laughing. I said, what are you laughing about? We worked on this to get done. He said, this is my example of how a town meeting can be used. Something can get defeated or approved with a small number of people. So what's critical, again, is getting people back to the table. And I think the masks, the pandemic, the invention of Zoom, and people getting comfortable with just watching something from the comfort of their home will impact our government going forward. Hopefully they come out to vote. That's going to be very critical. But listen to your social media, whatever you do, however you get your news today, or just call the office. Ask about what's going on with the charter, understand it, because it's possible there'll be questions on the referendum this coming November. Okay? That's on the charter.
Can I ask, we have done a get to know your town meeting with the Charter Revision Committee, and
Right.
we probably will do that again when they come up with their suggestions. But has there been an article in the paper that describes what the Charter Revision Commission does? That it's held at
That came up last
I think that would be helpful.
night. Yeah, we had a meeting Saturday and then last night.
Because when I
Question,
speak to people
there was
about
one
that,
couple
they have
there.
no clue.
Right, and they said, oh, Miss Andrea Beatty brought it up. Why hasn't there been any definition, anything written about charter revision? I can talk about it till I'm blue in the face, but if the press decides not to write about it,
I understand.
and I'll give you another example. I'm full of examples today. The reporter for the press came to me and said, her boss called her in and said, look at this article. And it was from another town by another reporter. Look at the number of clicks that got. You need to get going. And it's all about being online and getting the clicks of people reading online. It's no longer about, unfortunately, the Ridgefield Press and what's in the press. So if we get people to get online, we are doing, as a town, something called Ridgefield Alerts. I ask that you sign up for that, because we send out notices about meetings like charter revision, what time it is, where it is, etc. But we're doing the best we can. If you have any ideas, let us know.
You know, if you put a little blurb about Ridgefield Alert, we'll put it in. I would suggest you send it to nonprofits and say, please publicize this to your members.
Right.
We would be happy to do that.
Okay.
So that might be helpful, because I know I get it, and it's very helpful, so.
Yes.
I think in terms of the, to just follow up on that point, in terms of the alerts, it'd be helpful to maybe write a little bit more about, what's gonna be discussed. All you get is, here's the meeting and the time.
Yeah, you can get a text message, and we're limited to the number of characters there.
Maybe there's a
You can get an email, or you can get an actual voicemail about it.
Yeah, but maybe there's a link that you can put in and say.
There's usually a link to the town website, www.ridgefieldct.org.
Yeah.
For example, everything is on there, everything. And you can take a look at whatever pandemic numbers, the testing that's going on, meeting schedule, meeting minutes, videos of our meetings. We're doing videos of all of the charter revision. They are being recorded and archived. So we're trying to make as much available as we can. Of course, we're never going to be able to get to everyone, and that's unfortunate.
So these charter meetings I can see on the town website?
On the town's website, go to the town of Ridgefield, go to government, you'll see a drop down, and you see in the middle meeting videos. And you go to that, and there's quite a few videos there. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about community projects. How am I doing for time, Marilyn?
You're good.
Okay. Community projects. You heard me talk a lot about Branchville, kind of the forgotten child. We never really put any money into that area of our community. We're doing that now, and we received, the first grant was a TAP, T-A-P, Transit Alternative Program, $2.2 million. We had to put up $400,000. We in the town, we had a town meeting 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now. That's how quick government moves. We finally went out to bid. The bids came in. We're ready to award. Everything got put on hold. Why? Because under federal state guidelines, you need to have a percentage of the work given to business, WBEs, or minority businesses, we'll put it that way, right? They couldn't find any. They sent out letters to every single electrical contractor. You name it, name the discipline. No one was responding, and they're saying, if you make us meet that requirement, we're not going to be able to do the project. So there was a meeting in Thomaston, Connecticut last week asking the DOT to issue a variance, a waiver to the requirement that all of the minority businesses have to be used, could be waived. And that's what they agreed to do, so we're waiting for that to come through. As soon as it does, that contract's been awarded to Jay Appaluccio, a contractor, I believe, out of Danbury. And they'll begin the work. What that will be is a sidewalk from Wilton North up to 102 Tuscan Cup. There'll be a walking bridge over the brook. The width of 102, which at that point is very wide where it meets Route 7, will be narrowed so that you won't have to run out of breath trying to get across there. There'll be walking signs, crosswalks, and the sidewalk will continue up to the Norwalk River, just north of there. A sidewalk will continue all the way up to Florida Road as well, with a crosswalk over to the Ancona Plaza. And then in the future, we want to put a sidewalk up to the school, but that's not in this plan. The next thing are street lamps, similar to what we have on Main Street, will be installed all the way along. And the biggest part of this project, as I said, is the reworking of the intersection with 102, with new signalization and a four-way crosswalk that gets you across the street to the train station. Yes, the road is closed. Depot Road is closed. In 24, the bridges, which are at 90% design completion, Depot Road will be fixed first, and then Portland Avenue. And in that project, Depot is first. They'll open that up, and then close Portland Avenue, the next one south, add a traffic light, add a through lane, and widen the rail crossing at Portland Avenue so trucks can make a left. When that's all finished, the Depot Road closes. No longer vehicular traffic will be allowed to cross there because Metro North wants to close as many of these crossings as they can as a safety precaution because there have been accidents there. So there's a lot going on in Branchville. But the first project The 2 million will start hopefully in a couple of months. We'll see shovels in the ground on that. Legion Way, which was built, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, maybe longer, has become a major bypass, which it was intended to do to help alleviate traffic on 35. But what we're going to do as well is to put in a boardwalk along Legion Way. And we received a grant of $3.7 million called a LOTCIP, L-O-T-C-I-P. It's a local traffic capital improvement program. That's been in the works for a good 10 years. We finally got notification of that. That has been awarded to Dayton Brothers, a good contractor. Initially, when it went out 2 years ago, no one would bid it because of the cost of lumber, right? So now that the lumber prices have come back and there's relative stabilization there, they felt comfortable bidding that job. That job is due to start this year as well. Legion Way is going to have a lot of work going on because we also have the Maureen's a liaison to the WPCA for the Board of Selectmen. The WPCA is Water Pollution Control Authority, our sewer plant. And an update on that, Maureen, correct me if I'm wrong, we're about 75% on the sewer plant itself, which will not only handle in town, but in the future will be handling the Route 7 effluent as well. And in order to do that, we have to put in a pump station down on Route 7 and pump everything up into the new plant here on South Street. So that project hopefully we'll see winding down in the fall of this year, hopefully. But we're not sure. There have been a lot of delays, not just COVID, but supply chain has become a whole new term to us, supply chain delays, supply chain delays. And that's been true here. The generator, for example, for the sewer plant is well over a year in waiting for that delivery, well over a year. And the same thing with everything else. When we first started with pipe and every kind of supply motor you can think of. But we're getting there, albeit slowly. We are getting there, and hopefully that project will be wrapped up in probably by the spring of '24, when you can say we're done getting all the detail work. The pump station will then be operated, because you can't turn it on until the sewer plant's completed. That will be activated, and then we will decommission or raise, tear down, demolish the sewer plant on Route 7. And the reason that was done is long-term. You can think of operating costs as if you're running 2 plants or 1. If we did not shut that plant down and pump into the main plant, the state was going to require us to do the same upgrades that we're doing to the sewer plant here in the center of town. And that would have been much more expensive than about $9 million to do a pump station and pump into town. Now, there are grant monies available. Not a lot, but we have gotten grants. But that will allow the pump station to start up, and we can sell the 2 acres of land where that sewer plant is. So why are we going to sell the 2 acres of land? It's landlocked. We have no use for it. However, there are the owners of the Pond's Edge, and they are interested in developing the rear of the property, or when you come into town from Route 7 by Buck Hill, where the flashing light is, if you look up and to the left, you see a water tank. Right there to the south is about 8 to 9 acres. That will be developed by, well, at least the owners are hoping for this. It'll be going in front of planning and zoning as a condominium complex with some affordability. How much, we don't know yet. But that'll be coming up in front of planning and zoning in the near future. The owners have asked the Board of Selectmen to bring the sale of the 2 acres where the sewer plant is located now, which will be their formal entrance, for $441,000. They're going to pay us appraised value. They don't want to go through planning and zoning and incur the cost of all of the construction documents if the people of the town of Ridgefield say no on the sale of the land. Because if they don't have that land, they're going to do something else. They're not going to put this through. So the Board of Selectmen will be talking about that in the next couple of meetings and setting up the town meeting. Because the town meeting and a public hearing is needed anytime we sell any land that belongs to the town. So that's coming up soon as a project. But all of that going back to Leegee Way and the boardwalk. The bridge that's across from Fox Hill, a lot of you see that, and it goes to the parking lot. It wasn't put in for the purpose of the parking lot. It was put in for the purpose of establishing a trail that starts around the Parks and Rec Center, walks south over that bridge. There'll be a new sidewalk up to Cobb's Hill probably next year. Cross Route 35 down to Farmingville. Walk the boardwalk up to the Roar Animal Shelter. Walk another sidewalk over to Goodwill with a switchback up to the rail trail. So someday you will be able to walk around Parks and Rec all the way to Branchville and back. It's not bad, but it's a dream. We're working on it, but each of those pieces, like the bridge to nowhere that we put in, there was a reason for it. The boardwalk, you say, what are they putting a boardwalk in here for? There's a reason for it. And someday all of those pieces will come together, which will allow Ridgefield residents to walk from Parks and Rec down to Branchville and back if you want. And the grade on the rail trail is 1%, because in the old days, the engines couldn't make it up the hill if it exceeded a 1% grade. So although it looks pretty flat, when you come back up, by the time you get up to the top, you'll be huffing and puffing like the old engines did. Right? Yes?
So how will that boardwalk work with that huge hill that goes down to?
Yeah, what they're going to do is drive piles down, and then there'll be pile caps and grade beams from one to the other, and then it'll be cantilevered out over the open space. It has all of the permits in place. Planning and zoning, inland wetlands, everyone has looked at it and has given their approvals.
What was the question?
I'm sorry?
What was it? Yeah, I'm sorry too.
What
was the question?
What was the question?
That's what I said.
The question was, I heard her question.
Well, I didn't.
Is this an astrology?
The question is how you're going to build it.
Seems crazy.
Because the side of the road, the boardwalk, because the side of the road, if you're going down Leegee Way to the east, it drops off into the wetlands. So how are you going to build anything there? Or are we going to build it on the opposite side? The opposite side is all private property,
Right.
and we would need property owner's permission. It's very tight up through there. That's why the boardwalk and all the consultants determined that that would be the best route to take. It'll be 8 feet wide,
Right along Leegee Way.
all the way from Farmingville up to Roar. If you can imagine that. Also, ADA, I mentioned that I think before a little bit, Department of Justice. Someone complained, filed an ADA complaint, and that's a serious situation for a municipality because the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, is a federal law. It is not a state law. The state has no agency. It is federal. And if someone files a complaint and the U.S. Attorney's Office decides to investigate, they're not going to come to Ridgefield to just look whether a parking spot located on Main Street is the right width and meets all the requirements. They're going to look at your entire town. In our budget several years ago, we put in $75,000 to do an assessment of our town. And the purpose was, the only other community we know did it in Connecticut was Stamford. And they used a company out of Boston. And they came down, and it cost us $75,000, and they did a complete assessment of our community, all of our buildings, both the town and school buildings, as well as all of our fields. to be sure we were meeting the ADA law of 1990. And of course, no one is 100%. Some towns haven't even heard of, don't even think about ADA, believe it or not, so that's the extreme case. But we had that report done, and since it was done, we have $75,000 a year for the last couple of years that we use to address some of the low-hanging fruit. For example, sidewalks that may lift a little bit in the wintertime and create that ½ inch, 1 inch that makes it almost impossible for a wheelchair. We bought a machine. It's like a little rototiller, but it's got a concrete cutter in the front of it that shaves down all of those lips so we can create smoothness. We checked all of the water fountains in town and put in new ones to make sure we had a lower one for those in wheelchairs and an upper one. That's been all done. We adjusted all of the pressures on all of our doors because you cannot exceed 5 pounds of pressure to open it. We put in ramps at many of our fields. The most recent one at Farmingville, a parent called and said, the field activities, end of year school activities are going to be on the field. My child's in a wheelchair and will not be able to participate. They're going to have to stay at the bottom because in Farmingville School, to the back, the field is elevated 8 or 10 feet, right? With a hill up there. Well, for those of us who do not have any special needs, we never think about it. But to that young child in a wheelchair, they have to sit there at the bottom and watch because it's almost, you cannot push a wheelchair up that hill. So what did we do? We went, we created some ramps. It caused us to have to put some drainage in to address a water problem. We also put special matting at the playground so this child could be as close as you can get to participating with all the rest of the kids. That's ADA. And it involves from children, special needs, all the way up through seniors that are in this town and need help, whether it be with parking or whatever it is. As I said, we're not perfect, but the complaint came in, believe it or not, to the Department of Justice. We received a letter to say that someone had filed a complaint that parking on Main Street did not meet ADA compliance, and it was from 400 Main Street, which is Town Hall, to 472 Main Street, which is the library. And they wanted us to present and discuss all of the issues on Main Street relative to parking or any abutting areas. And I said, well, Main Street was under construction. It was all torn up for the last year plus. I don't understand it, but we'll certainly look at it. And we pulled the IHCD report, and that's why we did it. We could send to the Department of Justice a complete analysis of our whole town and what we have been doing for the last couple of years to bring as many of our buildings, as many of our play fields, our ball fields, porta-johns that you have at a ball field. Do you know you have to have an ADA compliant one that has a little ramp? Well, they never exist. We never thought of that. They're there now. And it's something you may not pay any attention to, but to the person in the wheelchair, someone needing that kind of help, it's there for them. So we'll continue to do a lot here. Hopefully we'll get some good responses from the Department of Justice. In a way, I'll welcome them here. Tony said, don't do that. Don't call them and invite them. But we feel confident that as a community, we've really taken that extra step to help those people with special needs and accessibility most important. And I thank Don Scioto, who chairs our Commission on Accessibility, for being a leader and a pusher in this area. He's done a great job.
Why are there red mats on the ramps from the street?
For the blind.
Is it really?
It's more that pattern. You can feel it with your cane, the change in surface. And that tells them they're at the edge of the road. And to listen for the light to change, because you know, we installed those little beepers on the red lights. Right. I was sitting in my office one day and I heard this beep, beep, beep. And I kept looking out the window and I said, where the hell is this truck backing up? Well, it wasn't a truck, it was the red light. And that in and of itself isn't great, but those mats really help the blind. We don't have a lot of blind. We have several people in town who are blind that use it on a regular basis, and I can see them with their cane. They know exactly where they're at when they get to that point. Any other questions on ADA? A new sidewalk on Pound Street and New Street. The plans are due back any day from the engineers. That's another grant of about $400,000 that will put in a new sidewalk from Gilbert, just beyond New Street. We'll go down to Pound Street, take a right, and come back toward Main Street, completing that block. That's been in the works for many years. We had a couple of residents who have refused. They said, if you put a sidewalk in, I am not taking care of it, and you're not putting it anywhere near my property. We had a petition that was signed by about 98% of the people on the street saying we want it, so we're going to go ahead and go with it. There are 2 trees that need to be cut. One, the people gave us our permission just before Pound Street, and I forget where the other one is. We're going to try our best to get around not having to take any trees down, but this new sidewalk will do wonders for the people on New Street, because that's become a speedway in the morning for commuters. They come off 116 down at the Legion, the American Legion, at the intersection with New Street, and they're 40, 45, 50 miles an hour all the way up that hill. And it's a pretty dangerous street, so we're going to do part of it. We're not going to go all the way to the bottom, but it's a good start on sidewalks. Not to mention, we'll be doing in front of Ballard Park, picking all that up. We wanted to wait for the Main Street project to be complete, and then heading up toward Ballard with a refreshed sidewalk there. Highway Garage 2, which is where the mechanics garage is, we're looking for a roof replacement to be put in the spring and summer, and that's expensive. It'll be $200,000-300,000, that roof. But what we're doing, and the reason I mention it, back to the question concerning solar, is that what we haven't done over the years is put in the requisite amount of insulation on a roof that will insulate the building below, and then put our solar panels on that. And it's all the solar installations now are stabilized with ballast. They no longer drilling clamps down into the roof, causing leaks. It's all ballast weight that holds them in place. We'll be doing that building, as well as Branchville Elementary School. Now, Branchville Elementary School will be number 8 of the 9 schools. It'll be the 8th school that we have added solar to. And to give you a little bit of an idea of what solar energy does for the Scotland Elementary School, 6 months last year was completely off the grid. We had no power consumption at all from the grid, all solar. But what we did is not only the roofs and the solar, but we did all LED lighting throughout the building that reduced the energy consumption. So that's the direction we're heading in with our town. A follow-up to Branchville will be at Ridgefield High School in the parking lot, and that's the parking lot between the high school and Scotts Ridge Middle School. We're going to be putting in a solar canopy. So that will be installed, and it's somewhat like a portico for your cars, right? The kids will park underneath those. That will generate about 500 kW per year for that campus. We'll be reducing our power consumption at Ridgefield High School by about 30% once that's done. That's $1 million electric bill, $1 million plus with the new rates. I know it's a lot higher than that. $1 million a year just for that facility, and we'll be saving about 30% with solar. So to the question about what are we doing relative to solar, it's pedal to the metal. Now, we wish it was a lot more efficient than that, and there's no doubt that the panels of the future will only increase through technology the degree of efficiency that we can gather from them. Hopefully, we can fit those new panels to the current infrastructure that's on all these roofs so we can continue to take advantage of reducing our power consumption, reducing our carbon footprint, et cetera, et cetera. Window replacement, all the windows at Yanity have to be replaced, and that's been for years. We're not allowed to use that as an emergency shelter because in a hurricane, those windows are not rated properly. And if we do need, for example, at Parks and Rec, we had a failed generator, and that's our shelter. I won't tell you why it failed. Ran out of fuel.
That's true.
I couldn't believe it. To run out of fuel in a storm, what happened is there's been a lot of turnover at Parks and Rec and people, and there's an auxiliary tank with 1,000 gallons extra. No one knew how to get it to flow. And the generator ran out of fuel for about 6 hours until they got it up and running again. Can't make it up. Governor Park will be doing tennis and basketball courts, new concrete that will be installed on all of those courts. It's a major upgrade, including all the LED lighting efficiency to reduce light pollution. Having lived on Prospect Street for a good part of my life, when the lights are on up there, it lights up the whole sky because they're really old and inefficient. By going with the LED, we'll bring that light pollution way down, reduce energy consumption, but also put in a surface that should last for many years, at least 20 years. Right now, we repair the basketball courts, the tennis courts, at least, Maureen, 3 to 5 years. We're putting 30, 40, 50,000 into them. So the decision has been to do the concrete. It'll be floating on top of the current asphalt and last a lot longer and not damage, I think it's an oak tree there, right, at the field. Won't damage the root system there because that's a mighty important tree. Not to mention the fact that we're going to be doing some work in the near term. The Norway maple, which is an invasive,
It's very
Norway
controversial.
maple behind the Guild of Artists is now the single largest Norway maple in the state of Connecticut. And that was brought to our attention by a gentleman from Lewisboro, of all places. So we're going to be doing some work there, roping it off, and trying to hold vehicles away from it. And I said, our luck will be, we'll make this effort and then it'll die because we changed it, right? You always think about that. Why would we change a good thing? But it needs to be done. And then finally, probably one of the biggest projects you're going to be hearing about, if you haven't already, is a new PDFD, Police Department, Fire Department facility. Both of those facilities, the Fire Department is located on Katoona Street, as you all know. It's well over 100 years old. It's been added on to, and of course, they have to come out of Katoona Street onto Main Street to respond to any calls. Response time is the most critical thing you use as a data point in measuring how good your response is for the people of Ridgefield. And if any of you have been in a serious situation, waiting for an ambulance every second is an hour. It just drags. And they do a pretty good job. But it's tough getting out of there sometimes with traffic situations. Not to mention the age of the building. They're busting at the seams. Plus, we're seeing a lot more females apply. Do you have, Danbury actually does this. I asked the question, what did you do to accommodate for female? And they said, what are you talking about? I said, well, you have female firefighters. Where do they sleep? Where do they take showers? All of that. And they said, they take turns, they sleep in the same bunk room. And I said, there's something in my gut that tells me I would like a little more privacy, right? So in this current facility, we took the fire marshal's office, threw them out, located them up at the annex, and created a bunk quarters for our female firefighters. We have one now, and hopefully we're going to have a lot more. The new facility would obviously take that into consideration with a well thought out locker room for females as well as males. But as our town grows, so does our responses. Our responses are increasing at the fire department every year. We're hitting 4,000 calls a year. Most of them are EMS. 60 to 65% of our calls are ambulance calls. And what we do in Ridgefield, when we hire a firefighter or a paramedic, we'll hire paramedics because we want to have at least 3 full-time paramedics on duty on every shift, 24/7. These are people that work for the town of Ridgefield. And we would rather hire a paramedic and train them as a firefighter than hire a firefighter. To send them to paramedic school is going to cost us $50,000, $60,000 plus a couple of years of training. So we found it very advantageous to hire a paramedic, and a lot of them are already volunteers in the fire service. But we have been able to build an EMS corps that is a tremendous asset for this community in terms of responding. I can't tell you how many saves they have had with cardiac arrest, and the most up-to-date equipment that you can have are on those ambulances. We are currently at the cusp of having to fully staff that 3rd ambulance. We're not there yet, not yet, but this all involves manpower as well, and if we do, that ambulance would be out of Ridgefield. But for now, we staff 2 full-time, and some of you, a lot of people will ask me, how come every time the ambulance comes out, the fire truck has to follow it? That's ridiculous. Look at the waste of money you're doing. The reason for that is for lift assist. Many times when you're making a call with an ambulance and there are 2 of you and you have an individual that has passed out, whether in the bathtub, in the bathroom, wedged in between the toilet and the bathroom, and you can't move them, you need those extra people. We can do everything we can with equipment in terms of accommodating, getting them down the stairs, but that initial stabilization of getting them out is difficult. So that's why we send the fire truck, to be sure there are plenty of people there to assist, to help the individuals that may need help. So that's the fire department, and a lot of changes have happened. Mainly, they actually work and train with the police department. That never used to be the case. There wasn't a great deal of camaraderie between police and fire, because police say we have to work all night long protecting our community. You guys are in bed until we call you. So there wasn't a lot of love. Today, there's a lot of respect for one another. Because as we live in our country today, and we're exposed to and see all these terrible active shooter situations, whether it's a school or a mall or God knows where, we're seeing it more and more often. And when police are responding to those situations, they too want to be sure that there's going to be a paramedic right there, God forbid they get shot. So what they do, and they do it all the time, is they plan and train for an active shooter in Ridgefield, Connecticut. And you're going to say, oh God, that'll never happen. Don't say that. Because we need to be prepared. Just as we prepare for storms, we have Ridgefield alerts and emergency response to let you know what's going on with the storm, how to prepare for the storm. We have CERT teams, community emergency response team. We have about 40 or 50 people that participate in that. The police and the fire train the same way for an active shooter. They use some buildings at night that are vacated. You get permission from an owner to go in and stage an active shooter. How they're going to have it. Where's the ambulance going to be? For our schools, God forbid it were to happen. There's a plan, believe me, every school is totally prepared. And the plan resides with the chief. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Well, I don't know what it is. Board of Education doesn't know what it is. But the principal does, and the police do, and the fire. They know exactly wherever that shooter is, what's the response going to be, what doors are going to be used, etc. All that has been done. So police and fire are beginning to work together. They like it, but also out of necessity because of the world we live in. A public safety administration building that houses both police and the fire is the direction we're heading in. And that building would be located, if the voters approve it, and it's got a long way to go, It would be located on Old Quarry Road across from Ridgefield Station, is it now? There's a piece of land right there. We looked at everywhere. We looked at taking VP School and converting that. We looked at Deniz and building a facility there and having to build another soccer field. And every place we went, it was costing substantial money just to get the property. So it's going to cost us a lot of money to get the property ready, the site work. But we already own it, and we don't have to buy it. We looked at Parks and Rec on 35 out front. There are several homes there that have been for sale and being leased. Do we buy it there? We could only fit one of them there. We looked at on Cobb's Hill behind Canby Motors, that brick building. We looked at that location. That could only accommodate one, or not both, one or the other. We couldn't fit two. We looked at the current locations. Location on Kachuna Street, there's just absolutely no room. You can't even park there. There's no room. There's no parking there. And then the police station, we looked at purchasing the Montanari property next door and using that, but architecturally, historically, you don't want to disrupt the character of that neighborhood, and that was a good possibility, plus the cost of acquisition and access. To put up a joint facility, it became more and more difficult. So that's why we ended up, and I'm saying all this because we wanted to be sure that we could let the people, the voters, the taxpayers of this town know that we have done our due diligence. We have exhausted where we can put this facility. And being in the center of town is the most critical. That was the most critical guideline we had to abide by. We have to be in the center of town. And Old Quarry Road does that for us. It's going to be expensive. We're looking around $60 million to do a place like this, but it's one and done. We will, if you approve, have a facility that is being built to last a minimum of 30 years, maybe probably 50 years the way we are, because those buildings are well over 100 years each one. So if you're going to go 50, you might as well go 100 years and wait, right? But that's where we're at now. We have to address it. What do we do with those buildings? I don't know. Board of Selectmen, we'll have meetings about that, we'll have public hearings. But please, again, going back to the notification and getting people to understand what's going on is going to be critical for all of this, right?
That's down the hill from the vet clinic where the driveway to ACT is?
Yeah, there are two driveways, the upper one and then the lower one.
Oh.
The lower one will be pushed down toward Goodwill Trailer a little bit. And that area between the upper one and the lower one would be where the facility goes in. Right now, it's in the schematic design. Both chiefs have looked at the layout. They need to approve to be sure. There are two boards working on this, the Board of Police Commissioners and the Board of Selectmen. And hopefully we'll be having a meeting in the next 2 to 3 weeks to look at where we're at, the work that's been done, and hopefully come up with it. So, yes, sir.
Can I ask a question about the Lansbury House?
Lounsbury?
Yeah. In respect to the RCK preschool, which you probably, as you know, what happened with that?
The nursery school?
Yes.
That they made an agreement with St. Stephen's Church.
Yeah, I know. But my question is, I had kids to go to the RCK, 3 kids, and as you probably know, and many people here, so many kids went to that preschool through last 45 plus years, and I believe that the way the Lansbury House handled this is a disgrace not only to them but the whole community. And as far as I know, the preschool came to town because town owns that property. That's my understanding. And Lansbury House pays town basically no rent, correct? That's my understanding.
Right, they have to take care of the building.
Yeah. So if the preschool came to town for help to try to keep the preschool and town, my question is why the town did do nothing to help the preschool to stay there, because that preschool has been the backbone for Ridgefield for so many decades, and Lansbury House, what they have done and how they treated the preschool it's a disgrace.
The Board of Selectmen did write a letter to the Board of Directors of the Lounsbury House
But nothing happened.
requesting that they take a look at this and review it. Lounsbury came back and said, we've done that. We have been talking with the daycare for the nursery school there for many, many years about this. We lose money every month. We absolutely lose money, and we need to get more money. And they came up a little bit in the rent, but that became the back and forth. And there is an agreement, a long, long-standing agreement between the town and the community center and the Lounsbury House, that they take care of the Lounsbury House. They paint it, they do everything to it. You'll never see a line item in our budget, other than they may come in and ask for a special appropriation for a capital project once every 10 years, 15 years. But there's no annual operating. And they keep the house on the corner of Main Street and Market Street, as well as the house down Market Street. They rent those two places to collect, to maintain the house in the condition it's in. That was the agreement. So the Board of Selectmen kind of said, you know, we have an agreement with them. Why have an agreement if we're going to tell them you can't do this? We didn't feel we had the legal right to walk in and say that. I was involved right from the beginning. The board of the facility came, not the Lounsbury House, but the school came. We looked around town. I walked around town with them. They wanted to stay there. It was an emotional break, historical. And St. Stephen's, Pastor Altop did make the offer. They felt that wasn't large enough. But then further discussions made that a reality to allow them to move across the street. It's unfortunate, but we try and not get involved with the 501s. They rent the building. We have agreements, and there are guidelines there, but we don't like to step in because once that starts, it happens in many different situations. And we don't want to micromanage that.
They are a non-profit. So the argument for them that they want to kick the school out and make more money is ridiculous.
They were losing money. The Lounsbury House is a 501.
Then they're non-profit.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. Yes.
Is there something that can be done about the parking problem with Prospector and the library? You come to use one or other, you can't even park. Every position is taken. And it must be outside towners. It must be people coming in to work in town taking all the parking.
Yeah, parking is a problem, and it always has been. Many years ago, we had an architect come from Yale who gave a presentation here after reviewing the parking in our town relative to not having enough parking, and the assessment was, you have a very viable downtown. People are in town all the time. You're very lucky. Your parking, and the way our town is laid out with Main Street and then behind Main Street, there's a tremendous amount of parking. He said, technically, you have quite a few spots. It's just that you have so many people in town. So do you look at it that way? Or do you say, we need more parking, let's build more parking. You can't do it with a garage, because people threaten to hang me from the flagpole in front of Town Hall if we built a parking garage. How about a parking facility, you know? So it's a problem.
But have you seen the number of cars that come in the morning and the number of cars that go out in the evening?
Yeah, we did all the traffic
They
counts.
must be sitting in our parking here probably all day.
Long time ago, we did a traffic survey, and we did an O&D, and that's an origin and destination for cars coming through town. And we found out that of all the cars coming through town every morning, only 16% actually don't stop and are just traveling through. We have the second highest employment next to the city of Danbury, and the town of New Milford is Ridgefield, in terms of the number of people that come to work here. And it helps support all of our stores, the restaurants we have. I haven't even gotten into the ARPA funds and how we gave $700,000 to all the 501s, because Ridgefield is such a destination today, and I think we have more restaurants than almost any other town around here. Probably more than Danbury. in our downtown area. We've been very, very successful with that. Some people consider that a positive, some a negative because of the traffic it generates. Well, we did do
It
traffic.
isn't a positive when you come to the library or the prospector, you can't park because parking is taken by outsiders.
Yeah, I have one suggestion. I noticed these libraries are probably scheduled so that they don't clash with the children's program. The library, I couldn't find parking today. But as I was leaving, I saw so many moms were leaving with children.
I thought there were a lot of people here. I said, wow.
So I think they ended.
Well, there is,
If you started 11:10 or something, 11:15, we could have cut the parking.
Well, we built 37 new spots over on Governor Street. No one parks there. They don't want to walk. And yet to walk there to the store is not even as far as walking from one end of the mall to the other. But it's this thought, this psychology that people need to park as close to where they're going as they can. I tell people with employees, have them park, you can park all day there for free. Nope, not gonna park there. Yes?
Well, I think that adding some parking with this Main Street development was great. I've noticed in CVS that there are more spots. My question is, why are there still so many spots that restaurants are using for outside seating? Is that because
COVID.
It is COVID, but
Oh, yeah.
but it seems like if we have relaxed the masking and everything else, it seems like if you walk around in the spring, summer, and fall, there's still quite a bit of spots that are being taken.
No longer. The last one was Bailey's Backyard.
Okay.
That came down a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, so I know over the summer.
Tequila
So
Escape had some, the Ancient Mariner was outside.
Hunan Noodle had a bunch, yeah, is that?
All of them. What was the
Okay.
last one?
Hunan Noodle had a few right out front.
Yeah,
They had
that's
like
no
three-
more.
They had like 4. Okay, so going forward, those spots will be open a little bit more.
Yeah, you know, that was a P&Z consideration to relax that, to help restaurants
Yeah.
get people out.
Mhm.
But it's run its course and no more.
Okay.
Could it be possible to have a permit outside saying that this is library parking only or prospector parking only?
Well, some of the landlords have done that. There are several lots in town that,
No, I'm talking about the parking up here because it's terrible.
that's up to the library. And, you know, there are people that park here and
Spend all
walk to other stores. There are people that park over there and walk here. There are people that park at Yankee Ridge and walk here. So once you get into that, this is my lot, you can't park here, everyone else is going to do it, and that's going to be a real issue. We would rather see people live and work together, and coming into town to walk around a little bit. If you have to park at CVS or Yankee Ridge, come to the library, or park at the library, go to the library, and then want to walk to
But you come to the
CVS.
library, you can't park because it's already full of parking. The block parking
Okay.
is gone.
Yes, Michelle.
I was wondering if Ridgefield has ever considered doing a student EMS program similar to what Darien has.
Yeah, student EMS. We do have in the senior intern program, students every year that participate with the fire department.
Okay.
And then we'll do the ride-alongs with the ambulance. Yes. And last year we had 2 young girls that were absolutely fabulous, that were looking at that as a possible career, paramedic or even medicine eventually. But yes, we do open that up. We have interns every year. Last time? Yes.
Last time I heard you speak, I'm sorry,
Go
my
ahead.
voice is not good. The last time I heard you speak, you said they were going to put little, like, cafes outside the restaurants, and maybe do some graffiti on the walls.
Oh, that's part of the Ridgefield project. You know, the roads were done, and we were looking at the front of town hall because we want to move the flagpoles and put new ones in that can support the large American flag that we haven't been able to fly since the trees came down. So part of that project, we began looking at, well, what is the front of town hall? How should that look? And we had a small group of people, economic development, people around town that got involved. We hired Jane Dodona for Main Street, who's a landscape architect. The Board of Selectmen paid extra to be sure that the state did it, because the state would plant that as a tree And we'd all be dead before we even recognized it as a tree. So we wanted to be sure to get higher caliber trees. Part of that was looking at the town hall, and then someone said, what about the alleyways? Because what we were able to do with Wing Biddle, Erstad Biddle, excuse me, in between, is it the Taco Place and Botanica? That alleyway, you'll see there's a piece of yellow concrete blocking cars. We were able to recapture a parking spot. But now people want to say, oh, look at this alleyway. How do we make it pedestrian friendly? And the thought is to do some murals if we have, and Dee Dee Colabella with the art studios has been very involved with this as well. So everyone's getting together to work toward that. But Jan Goldie worked on a master plan in town for all the alleyways. And remember I said the guy from Yale came several years ago? He said, you have a wonderful Main Street, but your backstage is awful. Meaning when you walk to the back, it's night and day. And what you need to do is dress that up. So one of the ideas is to look at these alleyways and begin seeing how we can create pedestrian ways that work better than what they are today. And part of that is the desire to close the alleyways, because part of the problem with traffic, is that if a car wants to take a left to go down Big Shot, everything comes to a halt. And we need to shut that off someday and make that a pedestrian way, but that's for the future.
Rudy, is there anything else that we feel that you want to add before we close?
Compassion.
Compassion.
Compassion. We, one thing I handed out to the Charter Revision Commission, and we'll give to the Board of Selectmen tomorrow night, our final copies of what we call boards, committees, and commissions, a guideline. And in there, it's all about everything from FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, when you have to have your minutes done, all of that guideline. But also, we've added a section that, and I say added because the model came from Newington. That's the only one I can find. So I called them, they said absolutely. So we adapted that to the town of Ridgefield and added a lot of stuff that is particular to Ridgefield. And one of the things we added, and the Board of Selectmen voted on, is a section at the top of all of our meetings that says, everyone, and I'm paraphrasing, basically respect one another, act with dignity, act with respect, we're neighbors. And that happened after, in Fairfield, Connecticut, actually, there was a Board of Education meeting that was horrible, the way people treated one another. And we saw that beginning to spread on our streets, arguments, people had an edge. There were no longer any filters. I think social media has had a lot to do with this. People can say anything about anyone and not have any consequence. There are no filters in society today. Is that good? Yeah, First Amendment-wise, we're glad we're having people being able to voice their opinions, but you can voice your opinion with respect as well. And that's what we are asking for. We had a couple of incidents on board committees where an individual posted something on their personal Facebook page. I was called to remove that individual because that person should not be representing people and ideas and working in town. That is against the First Amendment. However, because that individual didn't post it to a broad platform, it was their own Facebook page, and we all had the right to unfriend him. Apparently that's what you do, you unfriend them. Well, the attorney said, if you took action, that will be a major First Amendment lawsuit. Do not do that. And we had two people that did that. And using language that was really offensive to others and should not have been said. How do you address that? And that's why we're trying to do it and asking people to talk and think about compassion. Compassion is where, everyone has empathy. It's like, gee, Rob, I'm sorry you broke your leg there.
You have never said that.
In my heart, I was thinking. But compassion is where I go to Rob and say, hey, I see you have a broken leg. how can I help you? Can I take you to the store? Can I get groceries for you? It's actually talking to the person and listening and understanding and communicating and acting with respect. That's compassion, and that's the message we need to get out.
What about the YouTubers?
Don't get us started on that.
Guilty.
Right.
The
It's a
YouTubers,
town hall
they haven't been back. Cindy works in town hall, she's certainly aware of it. For those of you who don't know YouTubers, you all heard of Rupert Murdoch, right?
Yes.
We all heard of him. His theory of journalism was sensationalism. Put sensationalism on the front page. That'll sell the newspapers. If you get a great circulation, you can sell ads. Everyone wants to get the best penetration in the market, and that'll make your newspaper profitable. So fast forward. It's 2023, believe it or not. And newspapers are slowly fading. But what is coming in? This whole social media, technology, platforms everywhere, from chit-chat and TikTok to YouTube and everything in between. And it's out of control right now, I think. It's totally out of control. And hopefully the pendulum will come back a little bit. But getting back to Rupert Murdoch, YouTube, if you post something that generates clicks, everyone wants to see it, and I tell Marilyn, Marilyn's going to go click on it, Marilyn tells 5 other people, and all of a sudden the amount of clicks are going up, you get paid as the person that posted it on your YouTube channel. YouTube sells advertising. And people are going to advertise on the channel that gets the most clicks. So the YouTubers that are out there now and doing a lot of the town hall stuff, from Sherman to Ridgefield to Danbury and everywhere else, are doing it, and they're putting a cell phone in your face, and they did it in town hall when no one was in the office, and we have an open environment. You know, we're very open, come on in. These people came in, they walked around the corner to the finance department and stood in the doorway with a person working there just doing accounts payable. They don't interact with the public at all, they just do accounts payable. And they said, "Excuse me, who are you?" And she said, "Please, I don't want, who are you people? Why are you taking my picture? Please don't take my picture." And they laughed. And they said, "Come on, it's National Grinch Day." Because they ran into someone downstairs who told them, "Are you here for the Grinch?" "What are you talking about?" "Oh, it's National Grinch Day." So they said to her, "It's National Grinch Day. You shouldn't be yelling at us. Don't get upset. Come on, turn around." And she said, "Look, I asked you, please don't take my picture. I don't know who you are." And she got up, and she had a file. And as she walked out, she went, boom, like that, with the paper. They claimed that as an assault. Called the police, and the police issued a ticket for assault, which was subsequently thrown out of court. It was ridiculous to begin with. But the question became First Amendment. Is it their First Amendment right to be able to do that? And since then, they have come back a couple of times. One time, yes, I lost my temper and told them to get the hell out of the building. Guilty. But they do want that kind of reaction. And that was the mistake I made. I gave them a reaction that they could put up and create sensationalism, get the clicks, and be able to sell ads. And they get paid. If you get over 100,000 clicks, it's a $6,000 paycheck.
Wow.
Yeah. So is there something wrong with the system?
Yeah.
Absolutely. They are not First Amendment auditors, which they call themselves. They are First Amendment profiteers. They're using the First Amendment to make money, and that isn't right.
Are they successful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Get 100,000?
Oh. Yeah, because they stay there. They just point the camera at you. That's abuse.
Well, but I think people are also not stupid. They lose interest in this. They know that there's too much of this, and part of it is lies, TikTok, so many, like this WhatsApp, for instance. People post all kinds of rubbish,
You're right.
Okay. So they won't
You're
get
right.
the clicks forever.
So,
I did
Anyway,
not know if they were successful.
that's the story about the YouTubers. Any last minute questions?
I just have one statement along those lines that tells.
I'm sorry, we're out of time.
Don't click.
Yeah.
Until you're afraid not to click.
Right.
It's nice to be
Don't
old and
click
not
on
know
it.
about all that stuff.
Don't bother with any of it. I don't know.
No.
Thank you all. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you for